Let's talk a little bit about sanding and finishing. As I said in the beginning, a piece is not finished until the finish is finished. And you cannot build a good piece that doesn't have a good sanding job and a good finish on it. I think a lot of beginning turners overdo the complexities of finishing, because what you try to do is experiment with about 12 different kinds of finish. And what you need to do is pick about 3 and really learn how they work for you, rather than having it be a guessing game to finish each one of your projects. I turn a lot of spalted maple, and I like for my maple to stay white. I don't want to turn yellow, which is what happens when you're dealing with a finish that has a lot of linseed oil in it. That's just a natural amber color that will turn your white woods yellow. Some of the other finishes, like a wiping poly, don't have quite so much of the linseed oil in it, so they will not turn it quite so white, or quite so yellow. But good old lacquer will hold the finished color and the wood color pretty well. Now, I've been experimenting with a number of finishes over the year because I don't follow my own advice in simplifying my finishes. And the first generation of water-based finishes that I tried was terrible. They came out with a blue cast tube. So for a number of years, I've been using the General Finishes High Performance, which is a water-based finish. The problem is the water base causes it to raise the grain a little bit, and because it's water, it takes it a while to dry. You know, we're trying to dry the wood, but the finish is putting more water back into it. So I guess it's been about a year since General Finishes came out with a new version of their water-based finishes called the Wood Turner's Finish, WTF. And I've been trying it for about the last 3 or 4 months. I really like it. It dries very quickly. And as a matter of fact, it can be a little bit problematic that it dries too quickly. But if you can apply it with a spray gun or a airbrush, then it will go on fairly uniformly. And this particular piece was just an experiment to see how well it would dry and finish on rosewood, which is a typically difficult wood to finish because it has a lot of oil in it. This is 3 coats of Wood Turner's Finish sprayed on with an airbrush, and then sanded back just a little bit. And I think it makes an excellent finish. It's more like an acrylic. It's very hard when it dries, and it'll dry in 5 minutes if it's dry in your shop. So you can put 3, 4, 5, 6 coats on it a day with no trouble at all, and then sand it back and level it before you put the last coat on, which I didn't do with this one, so it has a little bit of sand and dust in there. But just to see how it works very nicely. And this is a new finish that some of you may not have heard of. The only place I know that you can buy it is Woodcraft.
Is that water-based?
Yes. It will raise the grain a little bit. So before you put the final finishes on, the final coats on, make sure you sand it back smooth again, because after you put the first coat on, it won't raise the grain anymore. It's sealed the wood.
Now, how do you hold your pieces? You put them on these little pyramids, or?
I have a finishing stand, which is just a little stand on the floor with a piece of well, it's about 8 by 8 piece of plywood on it. And I spray them either with the can, with the airbrush, and I can walk around it and get it nice and smooth and everything else. The really neat thing is, I was taking a class at the folk school in North Carolina where I teach normally. I took a class a couple of weeks ago with one of my former students. And one of the guys in the class came up from Texas with a little air-powered, lung-powered Venturi spray gun. And all it is 2 pieces of tube at right angles. BenFranklin.com. It's called an atomizer. $1.56. That's the sprayer that I used to finish this piece. Of course, I had to tinker with it a little bit. Thought I could spread the pattern out if I pinched the tube a little bit. Didn't make any difference. But it's a really neat little gadget, and I do a lot of dyeing on some of my pieces now, and it applies the dye very nicely. So that particular little gadget was worth my whole trip down there. since I teach there, I can go for almost free anyway for another week during the school. But that was my wood turning trip for this year, and the best outcome was a tool that cost $1.56. That's a good trip.
Which school was that?
The John Campbell Folk School in North
I was there
Carolina.
last week.
That's where I took my first turning class in 1986, not knowing how that was going to change my life.
Yeah.
So I teach both photography and wood turning down there now twice a year. It's like a place to go, and they pay me to come there and eat.
It's good.
I go work for food.
Good eating.
We seniors have our priorities. But this is a good sample of that wood turner's finish, and I can recommend it very highly. As far as I know, the only place I found it yet is at Woodcraft, and I don't get a percentage of that. But I think it's a valuable resource to have some experience in dealing with some of these finishes. Now, if I'm finishing a dark wood like walnut or something else, you have your choice of Danish oil and tung oil and all these other antique finishes. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference what you use as long as it does the job for you and in a predictable manner. So use it long enough that you can understand how it works for you instead of trying to find a new miracle finish. It's just like we woodturners always say, we're just one tool away from greatness. And that finish will then be able to give you a predictable result better than trying to get a result with an untested finish. Now, sanding, you cannot skip the steps of your sanding grits. I try to start at 220, 320, 400, 600. For my glossy pieces that I have dyed and have figure in them, I'll go 1,000, 3,000, and then I buff them by hand with new finish car polish using a cloth pad, just like I've been polishing my cars for years and years with the same material. And I never even thought about the fact that it could be applied to wood until I took a class with Gary Sanders down in Texas. He's been experimenting with a lot of automotive materials that have not been used, to any of our knowledge, in the wood turning field. There's some really great products out there. Some of them are pretty nasty. They're like a 2-part catalytic polyurethane for a car finish or metallics. But I've also started putting some little opal flares or some other things on, using that $1.50 air gun. Yes?
Where did you say you got that?
BenFranklin.com. Atomizer.
Okay.
I don't remember where the company is. The problem was they cost $1.56, and the shipping was about $4.25. So I bought 12 of them.
Is that the craft shop in Franklin? Is that the same thing?
Mm-hmm. Is that a chain craft shop?
Is there a logo around here?
Oh, is it? Well, they may have it installed. We don't have anything like that at home. Yeah.
Okay, could you talk a little bit about this piece and how it would differ from what you just did?
This was a prototype. Some people would think that that was a stick of firewood, which it was. Value-added firewood now. But this was when I was experimenting with the idea of wing pieces. And in this particular case, the thing wasn't large enough in diameter to have the hollow vessel that I hollowed through the hole in the top, not have holes in the wall. So this was the first one. You know, playing with firewood to make prototypes is no big deal. And this was the second one, which is also firewood. But I refined the technique by trying to keep the bark and things like that off of it. It's just piddling around. If you don't like it, you can burn it. But those are just...
Now, when you first mounted this on the lathe, did you hack off some to get a level?
Let's see if I can remember how I did this. This is exactly the same way I would turn, well, not exactly the same way, but pretty much the same way I would turn a wing ball. I would start with the tenon on here, turn the bowl shape up here, reverse it in the chuck jaws. Then I can turn my interior bowl, leaving the wood in the center. See the similarity? But then I turn it one more time back in the original tenon and I hollow it out. Then I reverse it one more time and I turn that tenon off, putting this onto a shaped jam chuck. So I've reversed it one more time than normal. But it's the same technique. And this is why that particular technique has a lot of flexibility to it. And all you need to do is play with it a little bit, waste a little bit of firewood, and then try to figure out what you can really make using a particular size piece to get you a finished result that you like. Any questions?
I think still don't understand how you're finishing the edges.
Same way that I would have done with this piece, a 3-inch sanding disc, 80 grit, maybe 120 grit, depends on how thin or how hard the wood might be. But make sure when it's still in the chuck, you're using that sanding disc, that you hold that edge, because if that sanding disc grabs it, you just splinter it. But then I will hold it, sand across the edges, same way on all 4 sides. But what I want is to get a uniform thickness, and if there's a little bit of variation, if you round that sharp edge over, you can hide a little bit. That's not cheating. It's a design opportunity. Whatever gets the job done is legal. In my shop, anything that eliminates sanding is allowed, but you still have to sand. So, that's it, guys.